Hey y'all, it is day 136 of spiritual healthcare. Welcome, 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 welcome. It's good to see everybody this morning. Here we are. Here we go, day 136. It is the first week of February, which is kind of crazy. Didn't think we'd get here, but here we are. So I hope you guys are having a really, really good morning. Good morning to all of you. Good morning, everybody. It is going to be a really, really interesting class today. Got a really, really great question that came in from Twitter about the idea of spirits and draining energy and how does that happen and what's the confusion, as well as the currency of attention and why it is so important. So we're going to do a lot today. If you guys have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/entityseeker, and I'm putting all the classes on there and stuff, and all my new spirituality with fire videos, they're all going on the YouTube channel and stuff like that. So check that out. So anyway, good morning, Sally. Good morning, Dan. Good morning to everybody. It's good to see you guys. I know the East Coast right now is under like 10 feet of snow, which is kind of crazy, which I mean, usually it's funny because y'all from the East Coast, they've been posting these photos of all the snow and stuff like that. And a really good friend of mine, Lizette Coley, who's the president of the Parapsychology Foundation in New York, has been posting all of these photos of how deep Manhattan snow is getting, because she lives in Manhattan and whatever. And I'm like, that looks like Alberta on a Wednesday. I don't know, because like I'm in the prairies, so it's snowy here. Like in the winter, we get like a ton of snow. So yeah, so now the East Coast now looks like the rest of the prairies over here in the West. So I don't know. So anyway, but I hope you guys are staying safe and warm on all your snow if you're from that side of the planet. So yeah, today is going to be really cool because we're going to be talking about the currency of attention in the paranormal, and the importance of it, why it plays such a big role, not only just in our lives, but in paranormal research and stuff as well. And as I say, a really, really great question that came in from Twitter about the idea of why this concept of entities draining energy has become such a thing over the years. So we're going to talk about that too, and what the deal is behind that. How does this all tie in? How does this work? Do others actually have control over our emotions and things like that? So this is going to be a really interesting day. So I hope you guys are doing really good. It's good to see all of you, and yeah, this is going to be really cool. I had an incident actually happen in the last little while, which was kind of interesting, regarding a video file that I was trying to send to my partner. And it was funny because I think we use two different computer systems. He uses Mac, I use PC. And it all kind of tied into this, which I'll rope in here in a minute. So good morning, Des. I'm just waiting for more people to get here. It's good to see everyone. Good morning, Tasha. Nice to see you. Oh, I hope your partner sounds like your partner is sick. I hope they get well. I hope they get well. So good morning, everyone. Good morning to all of you. Best wishes to everybody. And let's kick into this, because this is such an interesting subject, I think. And I want to start with the question from Jack Sorensen, who posted this on Twitter, and grab this because it leads into the rest of what we're going to talk about today. So basically, I'm gonna break down his question and simplify a little bit, because it's a bit long. But he was asking basically, do ghosts drain people, and can you be pulled down to have do they cause depression? Do they cause things like that? Basically, are they an emotional drain on people? So here's the thing. So I've heard this a lot. You see it on a lot of TV shows. A lot of clients will talk about this and whatever. So I want to start off with addressing that first. Okay, I want to start off with just addressing that first, because this is where this concept tends to get really muddled for people. Because when people are dealing with with negative hauntings. Okay, so say you've got a situation where you've got let's say a very territorial negative entity that is, you know, maybe being aggressive or nasty or biting or who knows, right? Punching holes in your walls, whatever. So the problem with a lot of these situations is, of course, people tend to react and tie their emotions to what they're observing, right? So when an attention is basically, when we're talking about attention, it's really looking beyond fact. It's looking beyond what we know. And the old idea of attention is that we're conscious of our environment, and then if anything changes, we pay attention to it, right? So that was the old concept of attention. And that just was proven to just not be correct, unfortunately. And the reality was, unless that thing interferes with what we're actually doing, we usually don't pay attention to it. We usually don't. And so when we get a situation where we've got somebody who's got some sort of negative haunting going on that's making them miserable, they start feeling miserable. They're putting their attention to something that is just making them maybe feel scared, depressed, upset, all of, you know, list your line of emotions, right? On the negative end of the spectrum. So you've got people that are, you know, you've got this momentum going on of negative thought and negative emotion. And what happens is that when you're stuck in that cycle, because that is so anxiety inducing, you end up getting drained. That takes a lot of mental work, mental effort. And then often, because we're kind of out of touch with what's actually going on with us, with what is actually going on in our environment versus what we are observing, we tend to want to blame the thing that we think is causing the problem. And it can be very anxiety inducing. It's just very anxiety inducing. So we have to be able to start to take a look back, take a step back, and break down what it is that's actually happening when we have a situation like this. Because I get a lot of clients who complain of the same thing. They say, you know, ever since this haunting started, I feel drained, I feel depressed, I feel upset. You know, it must be because I'm picking up on the emotions of something else, or I must be because, you know, I don't seem to have a reason to be feeling this miserable. But the problem is that when this is a bit of a chicken or an egg situation, but in some cases it really isn't. When you take a step back, you have to realize that the negative haunting wouldn't be there if you weren't already resonating at the frequency somewhere along the line, something you've got going on in your emotional being that picked up on whatever that is to begin with. So this isn't a matter of blame. It's not blame, because it literally is just sort of an unconscious response. You know, we don't pay attention to a lot of our emotions, a lot of what we're feeling, what's going on. And because usually we don't pay attention until something disrupts what we're doing, then we end up in a bit of a predicament, because we automatically then begin to blame the other thing. Where we had to have that emotional resonance going on to begin with, we wouldn't have attracted that incident to start. So it's a tricky situation, but it's something that gets confused often for something outside of us that must be controlling our emotions and our feelings. You made me do blank, right? And it can't happen that way. It doesn't work like that. So what do you do about it? How do you solve that? Well, it comes down again to start to be aware of what you've got going inside, and also where you are putting that attention currency. So let's talk about that. So as I was saying before, the old idea that attention is, you know, or our attention gets broken, or, you know, if we're conscious of our environment, then if anything changes, we start to pay attention. Really has been replaced with the idea that unless it interferes with what we're doing, the interruption of the behavior and the desired outcome of those behaviors, that is ultimately where we put our attention, which is a bit of a caveat, because the problem with that is we're then only really paying attention to things that make us fail. So this is a problem, right? This is a big problem. if we're only paying attention to those things that make us fail, right? If we're deviating our attention to the things that we do not want, say, for example, a negative paranormal experience or a negative experience in our life, if we're deviating our attention and then starting to examine and dig through it and then try to solve the problem, and then we're in the vibration of the problem and we're not attracting the solution, we tend to get spiraled out of control when stuff like this goes on. So ultimately, we start focusing on things like this to figure it out, or even worse, which is to prepare ourselves for this to happen again. So we're starting to change and alter our state of expectation, which is often a pattern that we see in hauntings, right? We get people who have experienced something, they're terrified of what they had just experienced, they're afraid it's going to happen again, they start dwelling on the fact that it's going to happen again, and guess what happens? They attract it again, something, and it might not be the same thing, but it's going to be something in that range of emotional set point, that emotional experience that they end up attracting again. And then they say, see, I was right. If I hadn't have been prepared for that, you know, I don't know what I would have done. So it becomes a really, really detrimental cycle. So here's how I like to break it down. And I was mentioning a little bit ago about the computer analogy, because this is actually quite funny. So as I say, my partner and I, we use two different computer systems. He uses Mac, I use PC. So I'm constantly sending him videos and all sorts of things. But of course, all the file formats that I end up sending him are in, you know, MP4 or, you know, other basic PC format stuff. I don't use the MOV files very much, because MOV files ultimately are usually Mac and whatever. And so finally the other day he says to me, he goes, you know what? It's like, I love your videos, but he's like, half of them, I have a terrible time getting them to work. Like, they just don't work. Some of them work. When you send me your fire stuff, it works. But when you, or the finalized fire stuff, it works. But when you send me the, you know, these like clips during the day, he's like, it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass. And I couldn't figure out what was going on, because he was having volume problems and it was fine on my end. Like, there was nothing wrong with the video clip. So I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. So anyway, I took the night and I realized that it was a file format issue. It was really simple. It was just, you know, switching my videos over to MOV files before I sent them. So it was really, really simple. But the computer is interesting, because when we look at it, ultimately, it's very simple externally, right? Like, if you guys look at your computer right now, I mean, it's usually either, if you've got a tower, then it's usually just a big box. If you've got a laptop, you know, it's just this flat gray rectangle, right? It's very simple, and it's designed simply because you're not supposed to pay attention to the computer. You're supposed to pay attention to what you've got going on the screen, and sometimes not even what's going on the screen. Sometimes it's like a subset of the picture that's going on the screen, right? And usually it's only about the specific task that it does. It only becomes a computer, usually, when the damn thing quits working, right? When something goes on that doesn't work, when something that we're expecting it to do doesn't actually function. And it's really easy, when we look at reality like this, it's really easy to pretend that something is simple in our general perceptual frame, right? It really is. But sometimes the world breaks in and reminds us that no, like, it's not. There's working pieces that are going on. And usually if your computer breaks down or something like that happens, then, I mean, usually for most of us, the next step is, you know, turning it off and on and unplugging it or something like that. But when it comes to the inner workings or inner mechanics of the computer, we have no clue how it works, like zero idea as to how it works. And at that point, you know, you send it off to somebody to get fixed or whatever. You know, you don't know how the parts work, but now it's causing a disruption. And hauntings are kind of like that as well. When we get something going on in the paranormal, it's a disruption to that very simple frame, right, that we have going on. And we live in a world that is so bounded by our expectations, we try to keep oftentimes complex things away from us, right? We don't want to deal with it. So you can see things like computers and objects, because this is what makes it more complicated. You can see it in multiple ways, kind of like the old blue and gold dress meme that was going around Facebook. Multiple different ways of seeing it, but each one each situation, each one of these little bits and pieces can be seen as truth. It really can. So when we've got something like a construct of reality, right? And whatever, what we pay our attention to ultimately becomes sort of whatever is disrupting our current version of that simple frame of reality. So in Egypt, so this I thought was really, really interesting. I read this the other day and I thought this was really cool. So in Egypt, the god Horus, okay, you guys have probably seen the hieroglyph of the eye, right? The great big eye. If any of you saw Stargate, you'll know the eye pretty well, the Egyptian eye. But the Egyptian eye was actually representative of the god Horus, who essentially was the god of paying attention. The Egyptians idolized and understood the value of our attention so deeply that was the symbol. It was the sort of this all-seeing eye. It was whatever attention went to. And here in the West, we make rationality our god, really. That's what we tend to worship, is this idea of rationality. And but in Egypt, it was very different. Like half of our brain is visual cortex, right? So when we think about the importance of our attention, where energy is being put, where energy flows, where our attention goes, energy flows. Attention is a massive currency. People pay money for this, right? People pay loads of money for attention. I mean, even if we just look at social media, you know, the amount of money that people will fork into something in order to pay get other people's attention, it's an extremely valuable currency. And, you know, what you're following, your interests, where you end up paying attention to often is where your being is manifesting. Okay, so let me just back up and say that again so you guys can grab it. Where we're putting our attention is where our being is manifesting. So that's a huge deal. That's a huge, huge deal. We're creating more of what we're paying attention to. Straight up across the board. And when we get something that happens in our experience, like paranormal activity or something that's just weird, it's like outside the box, or maybe it's somebody's behavior that you're going, I did not expect you to, be doing this, or, something that seems to come out of the blue, although nothing really comes out of the blue. We start to then put our attention and pay attention to those things that are different. And it brings up anxiety. It brings up all that because, let's face it can be anxiety inducing, right? So a great example of this within the scientific world and the paranormal world is something called the double slit experiment. So if you guys want to look this up, it's really cool. It's a really neat experiment. And basically what it has to do with light waves. And light waves have to do with both particles and waves, because light is so cool. Photons are so cool. They manifest in all these different things. They can be two things at the same time. It's really neat. So anyway, the long and the short of the double slit experiment is the idea that you've got light waves that, when observed, when there's an expectation put on whether it will turn into a wave or a particle, then what ends up happening is that observation, that expectation, will create the reality of what that will turn into. It's really, really, really cool. This isn't something that's just, woo-woo, whatever, new age crazy. This has been tested over and over and over again. And probably the king of the double slit experiment is a fellow by the name of Dr. Dean Radin, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So they've done a lot of this at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS, in California, and it's worth looking up. So this is a great example of it, though, right? Where if you have a bunch of people that are observing, they're paying attention to, they're putting their attention and their focus into an outcome or result, and you can see this repeated over and over. It got so bad for Dean that his expectation kept altering the experiments to the point where he couldn't participate anymore, because he was literally he was changing the outcomes every single time he went in. So another great phrase, I think, that ties into this, because how do we stop this in the crux of of the issue, right? When we're into this and we feel like we're in super deep, how do we stop this in the crux of the issue? And I think one of the great ways of doing this is you hear oftentimes people say, become the observer, right? You hear spiritual people say, you must be the observer of your emotions. But there really is something to that. And one of the phrases that we say all the time and we use all the time is watch what you say. So think about that. Watch what you say. How do you do that? You become the observer. And it's a phrase we hear constantly, but we don't think about it. Watch what you say. Be the observer of what's coming out of your mouth. And, and how do you feel when you say these specific things? And I think that is probably one of the key elements to figuring out where your attention is going. What's the context of what you're saying? Watch what you say. Watch it. Observe it. Take a step back out of it and go, what is coming out of my mouth? Because that's where your attention is going, straight up, all the time, every single time. Because oftentimes we're on autopilot when we're talking anyway. And we really often, this is the second piece, is that we manipulate reality, or we try to manipulate reality through effort. And this is something that people really struggle with. And ultimately we end up with temporary results because we're not paying attention, again, to where that attention is going. So in haunting situations, in haunting cases and things like that, oftentimes by the time a client will come to me, they're saying they have a laundry list of things that they've tried, laundry list of stuff that they've done. I tried this and it didn't work. I tried that, didn't work. Tried this, didn't work, didn't work, didn't work, didn't work. Everything kept going. And immediately, number one, you can tell instantaneously where their attention is. The attention's on the problem, not the solution. Number two, they're trying to manipulate reality through physical means, which is a very temporary solution at best. And the third part about that is that they're unaware, usually, of where their attention has now been drawn to. And where your attention goes, that's where your energy's going, every single time. So now you've got the power of two things. You have the power of two things. You have the power of choice and you have the power of awareness. Huge, huge. So if you can step back and look at this concept of paying attention and you become aware of that, you then have the opportunity to now make a choice and a decision that is not going to be fueled in trying to scramble and put out fires and manipulate reality. But you are going to be able to have the power of choice through the power of awareness, completely different. So when that external circumstance happens, so say for example, you're going about your day and something negative happens, whether it be you start to realize that, oh my God, I've got a haunting here that's not so good, or there's some paranormal phenomenon that seems to be really frightening, or whether it be just something going on in your experience that is disruptive, you can stop and again realize that you've got that power of choice through the power of awareness. Huge, huge difference. So what makes this hard, and really the only thing that makes this hard, is the lack of belief that it can begin to happen for you. It's really the root of the majority of this stuff, whether it be in our life, whether it be, as I say, in paranormal research or phenomenon or anything like that, is that the belief that it can't happen for you, that it won't happen for you, that you're either, you weren't chosen, or, whatever your excuse is, whatever you've got going on in your head. Maybe you were told over and over again as a kid, this stuff doesn't exist, or this doesn't happen, or, it can't happen for you. You weren't chosen. You weren't special. You weren't blah, 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 blah. There's fill in the blank. And that ultimately becomes a decision, which is a really good thing. This is a really, really good thing. There's an amazing life coach out there. Every once in a while, we back and forth on Twitter and stuff like that. His name's Mike Baer. And he wrote this amazing book called One Decision, which just came out recently. And ultimately, these different decisions that we run into through our experience really do stem from whatever belief you've got carrying on and that you're carrying around with you. So that's ultimately what makes this hard, is that you usually have a tape that's happening somewhere in your head that this just won't happen for me, whatever that is. So here's the kicker with, as I say, with all my clients, this is one thing that I tell them frequently, is there's good news and bad news. I mentioned this in my book as well, because it's really true. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is you're the only one that can do the work. Good news is you're the only one that can do the work. And other people, and this is where some investigators kind of, for me personally, I think they fall off track a bit, is that other people can't pay your attention. They can't pay your attention. Nobody can direct your attention all the time. People can distract you. People can, offer you solutions. People can move you in, maybe suggest different, modes of modus operandi. Like people can shift that around for a brief period of time. Again, we're coming back to the idea of manipulating reality for temporary results. But ultimately, people can't pay your attention. So this still comes back to you. What are you paying your attention to? So if you think about it, let's look at a more extreme situation. So people that have had issues with, I would say, stalkers, for instance. If any of you guys, hopefully you have never had an issue with stalkers, or people who are trying to manipulate or control you in some way. Various personality disorders are bad for this. If like malignant narcissism, sociopathy, all sorts of, pick your poison. People that are trying to control you or control your comings and goings and behavior and whatever. I had a friend of mine years ago who she had gotten into a very abusive relationship, and the fellow who was the problem had been recording with us, because we have a recording studio and whatever, and had been recording with us. And we immediately when we found out this was going on, he was banned. Boom, we're done. We're not working with you. You're done. You're not allowed to, And we ended up housing her for quite a long time. And making sure that she was safe and whatever, so she could get out of this situation. And what was interesting was that she would turn around and message him. She would text him. She would message him, and she would say, how dare you? How could you do this to me? What could you possibly be thinking? What is wrong with you? And of course he would message her back right away, like instantaneously right away. And he would say, how could you do this to me? How could you blah, 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 blah. And they would go back and forth. And he showed up at her door at one point. Like, this guy was driving by her house. He was doing, it was disturbing. She had to move. So anyway, as months and months and months went on of this, I had kept telling her, I said, look, I was like, the one thing you have to do, you cannot reply to this guy. You cannot put your attention there. 100%, like, you cannot report him to the police, drop it, do not contact this person. And she couldn't understand it. She said, well, I have to defend myself. I have to justify my position. I have to defend myself. And I said, you cannot do that, because what they are receiving at the end of the day, regardless of what you're writing in the email, is one thing and one thing only. And it's the one thing, the one currency that matters to them, and that's attention. You're paying them the currency. You're paying them attention. Doesn't matter what the email is consisting of. It really doesn't. You are paying them attention. Stop. So it really does become become a matter at the end of the day of where you're flowing your attention to. And you know, I think many of us have had to do that. I know Dan had mentioned here in the thread that he was was dealing with a stalker at one point here. I think a lot of people have dealt with people like that. It's, I think, more common than what you realize, but ultimately at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing. It is about paying attention and what that matters. So I want to read a little bit about that in the astonishing power of emotions today. There's a segment in here that I think you guys will get a kick out of. I know this like crazy person keeps trying to message everybody and I just blocked them. So I'm sorry, you guys. They're like, as soon as this is such a great example of it. As soon as you have an audience, right? They want attention. People want you to pay them attention. There it is in action. Right there. That's awesome. Oh my God. So anyway, they're blocked anyway. So check this out. This is really cool. Everything that you see around you, land, sky, rivers, buildings, and even people and animals, was thought vibration before it became the physical things you now observe. While most do not realize it, you are standing on the leading edge of thought. Further, you are so good at translating vibration through your senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch that for the most part, you are unaware of the translation process at all. It's just life and you're living it. But if you can grasp the concept that everything that you see around you is manifested, or in manifested form, was thought vibration first, and then thought form, and finally the manifestation as you see it now, the bigger picture of creation will begin to come into view for you. And then not only will you have a clearer picture of how things that you call real life experience come to be, but you will also feel the current from which all things come and upon which all things flow. I love that bit. This is such a great book, you guys. The Astonishing Power of Emotions. And it is absolutely completely true. It's exactly what we've broken down here today. Is that we tend to only pay attention, again, to the things that disrupt our everyday experience. We're very unconscious of our space. We really are. Here's a funny little quick story for you guys. So years ago, it was during the growth of Entity Seeker. I was working with reptiles at one of our malls here, because our mall here has a zoological program. And so I was at the time working with all the snakes there to socialize these rescue snakes that were coming in, and it was so much fun. Like it was such a fun thing to do. And ultimately, when I would walk through the mall, it's a busy mall. It's the second largest mall in the world, and I'd walk through the mall with these beautiful snakes, and the one that I had a really good relationship to, his name was Lucifer, called him Lucy, and he's huge. He was great big, 8-foot boa constrictor. He was about the size of a tire, like he was just massive. But the two of us, anyway, we walk around the mall together and hang out, and he would window shop. He was a blast to be with, the most gentle thing in the world. And I could literally walk the length of the mall, like the biggest mall in the world, from one end to the other and back, and have maybe one person see him. And he was not hiding. Let me tell you, he was not hiding. I'm like 5'2", and he was like 8 feet long, and it was like carrying him around was a thing. We had a system where I could actually carry him, and the two of us, we would have a blast. We'd go shopping and whatever. Nobody would see him. People are completely unconscious of what's going on around them. And what was interesting was that the people that did see him were other snake owners. Every time. If somebody saw him, they would stop and say, "Oh my God, he's adorable, he's beautiful, he's, and whatever." And they'd be like, "I have a snake at home and he's just like this," or "I have a snake at home," and blah, blah, blah. It was really, really interesting. So it was really, really fun. And interestingly, the other group of people that would see him were the people who were absolutely petrified of snakes and hadn't taken the time to clean that up. So it was those two groups. It was the people who loved them, like dearly loved them, and the people who were absolutely terrified. So it was very interesting to see. But the people who were like not mindful of that at all, like snakes were just not a thing for them. They just didn't cross their minds. It just wasn't in their vibration. They didn't see him. They just didn't see him. He wasn't on their radar. So it was very interesting little experiment that we did. And he was such a blast to be with. He was just awesome, big Colombian boa. It was really cool. So anyway, you guys, I hope this was like beneficial today. Because I think we misjudge the currency of attention and the role that it plays within hauntings, within our day-to-day experience, and what we are conscious of. So watch what you say. Watch what you say. It's really cool. So anyway, we can't do anything until we have some affirmations to go on. So everybody take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself and who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance that is constantly flowing into my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to my connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I'm able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of the life around me. I'm able to embrace love while letting go of fear. And I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. And everybody take a breath. Thank you, guys. Thank you for another awesome morning of spiritual healthcare. I love it. Wednesdays are good. As I say, if you guys are, want to point people to the classes, that would be awesome. entityseeker.ca or subscribe to youtube.com/entityseeker. Everything's getting posted there, and including, as I say, some of the fire stuff that I've been doing, and whatever, and teaching some of these lessons with fire, because I think it's a really profound way of demonstrating some of this stuff. It really, really is. So I hope you guys on the East Coast are staying warm. I feel like you guys have entered into the realm of, Alberta and where I am, because it's like -20 here in Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but -20 Celsius here right now. Really cold. So anyway, I'm, needless to say, staying in. And have a amazing week, guys. Amazing week. Remember, watch what you say, watch where your attention goes, and it'll teach you a lot about yourself. So I will see you guys next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.